So chapter 8 and chapter 9 deals with arrays, and the chapter 9 will deal with the multi-dimensional arrays and the more advanced features about arrays. But chapter 8 deals with just simple array types. And so an array is really a named list, or we call it a collection of data, okay, or elements. And each of the data inside the element, the array is called element, and that's the key term they use in terms of arrays in every language, okay? And Java, all the data type must be the same. So you can have an array, you cannot have an array of mixed data. You cannot have like numbers and strings or objects in there. Other languages do have that option, like PHP gives you that option. JavaScript is also available. You can have any sorts of data type in there. It doesn't really matter. But in terms of Java, C, C++, Visual Basic, most of these must have the same data type. So one array can only store one type of data. If it's integer, then everything else will be integer. Okay, you cannot mix it in there. Arrays are reference type, like objects. So reference type means they are a memory location. Okay, they don't actually store the data itself. They don't, right? They're just a memory location, and then inside the array you have these elements. So the data actually is stored inside the elements. Okay, so you cannot just say array name and then you want to array name is equal something. What is this? Yeah, I hate that when that happens. Okay, and then each, right, so store elements of the array and so on. When you declare an array, you have two options to declare arrays. The first method here is we have the data type followed by the square brackets. Okay, so the square brackets are used in declaring an array, and then followed by the array name. This is the Java methods. Java also accepts the C and C++ method by attaching the brackets to the variable name instead. Okay, so C++ uses it this way. Java uses both of them. So it doesn't really matter which one you use. You can pick and choose. And I think you can also mix and match later on too. It doesn't really matter. Okay. So this is, you just basically declare an array without any length. You didn't specify any length in there, but typically you also want to specify how many elements should be stored in the array. Okay, it is required. So here, this part, I'm declaring an array called whatever it is, and then I have 3 elements. Okay, so you always use the new followed by the data type, followed by the brackets, and then inside the brackets you give the length of the array. Okay, that's one way to declare an array. So when I run this file like this, that means that I have an array called array variable of data type, whatever that is, and then it has 3 elements. And the elements are pretty much tells you that this array is fixed at 3 elements only. It cannot hold more than that. Okay, up to 3. But it has no data in there yet. So if it's a integer type, then all the values will be zeros by default, right? And if it's a string, then there'll be just a blank spaces. Or you could do it this way. You can initialize the array, initialize it by supplying each element value inside a pair of curly braces. Okay, so by doing this way, you cannot do both of them. You can only do one way or the other. Okay, you cannot say, I want to do this first, and then after that, I will assign the value this way. Okay, you can't. It's only one or the other way. And again here, the number of elements is determined by how many elements you put in here. So you separate each by a comma to tell the engine that you're having 3 separate elements in there. So if you put 3 in there, it'll be 3. If you put 10, the total will be 10 elements. Whereas here, you preset the length to the array. And then after this, you can only use up to 3 elements. Okay, so so here we have how you will use the primitive data types. So primitives are your int, your float, your char, your double, and boolean. All these are primitive type. Okay, and usually all lowercase. And string is an object, so it's a separate type. But so let's say I wanted to clear a variable array called nums. Okay, and again, just by convention, that arrays that should be used by use plurals because they store a collection of data, right? Numbers, a list of names, okay, and so on. So you usually use plurals. I mean, it's not required, but just by convention. And so here I'm using declaring an int type called num, and then I initialize it to 3 element. Okay, and the same thing here: float, float, double, double, boolean, booleans. I mean, it should be boolean here, not booleans. Okay, so there have no values in there yet. That's one way. Another way is you initialize it this way. You just say nums equal to 1, 2, 3, and then now that's set to 3 elements. And here's the float. Okay, the reason why you put an F here is because if you don't, then it does not know whether this is float or a double. Okay, so if it's a float, then it's required for you to put an F in there after the character number, just to denote that that's a float. So you force it to be a float. Again, the difference between float and double is just the memory size. Okay, it's a smaller. You have a smaller size for float than double. And then so on. So boolean would be like true, false, false, true, whatever it is you put in there. Will be, again, will determine the length based on how many values you put in there. Okay. And then you access arrays by using the subscript or the index. Okay. Sometimes you hear the term index. Sometimes you hear the term subscript. Sometimes you just hear the term sub. Okay. So say name sub1 is the index of 1 inside the sub, or inside the array called names. Okay, so you reference it by the subscript. And you always count from subscript 0. So Java is a 0-based language, right? So you count everything in the array, in the string, or it's always starting from 0, like Visual Basic, things like that. Some are not 0. Some will start from 1. Instead, so those are called 1-based language, okay, and there are a few of those, but most of the languages are 0-based. So it's always count 0 as the first position. So what that means is that if you create an array of 3 elements, so your total count will be 3, but the index is always the total count minus 1. Okay, that's the maximum index in that array, because here will be a sub 0 of 0, subscript of 1, subscript of 2, right? We have a total of 3, so it's always minus 1. And you will get confused because later on, if you haven't learned already, there are other languages that use different size than and not just the size, but how you declare it's also different. Like for example, in Java we declare that float of 3. It tells me that that's the number of elements, not the maximum index. Okay, the index will be from 0 to 2, right? Okay, but in Visual Basic it's the opposite. Okay, it means if I put 3 in there, it means that maximum index is 3. So I have a total of 4. Okay, so it's reversed in Visual Basic. So that's why it's confused for those students who took Visual Basic and now Java. Okay, it's confusing. All right, so this one tells the number of elements, but the index is 1 minus this. Okay, the maximum index.
So the number of elements is 3, but the maximum index is 2.
Yes. So right. So with 3 minus 1, because we include in 0. We count from 0 to that many elements, right?
You can't leave it blank again.
No, right? You cannot leave blank, right? Unlike PHP or JavaScript, you cannot leave it blank. So you can't say, I'm gonna leave this one here 3, and then this one is undeclared, and then this is like 5, or something like that. Okay, all of them have to be initialized. Okay. So just remember that it's a zero base. So if I have if I say to you declare an array of schools with 10 elements, okay, and then assign the 10 values to those, then just make sure you know that the max index is 9 and not 10. If you index 10, it's going to have an exception error. It will say it's out of boundary or out of bounds, out of the index. Okay. So here again, I'm showing you how to access the data. So you have a scores of 3 elements, and you can only access the 0, 1, and 2 index because those are already the third element, so you maxed out. You can also use variables to store use as your subscript instead of the constant numbers. And again, these are always whole numbers. I mean, only integers. You cannot use decimal numbers in there. It can't be like 0.1 or 0.2 or something like that, or it can't be like characters. So you can use array variable names to hold that as well. And you'll see that this is very common using variable names. It's much actually easier this way. When you loop through the array to get those data, then you want to use variable names. So reading the array will be like the array name and then the brackets followed by the index position. To assign or change data, then you again this array name the index equals the null value. Okay, just like so you would treat this just like your normal variable. If it's an integer or a double or float variable, you would just do like that. Okay, and here you can see that I am assigning 3 from the value of the first index plus the value of the second index divided by 2, right? So you can assign other array elements as well. The length of the array is, you can determine that by using this length property. I underline property here just to tell you that there's a difference between this property and this length method, which is used in string. Okay, so don't confuse the two, because in array there is no length method, but there's a property, which is a field that stores the number of elements inside the array. So sometimes you may not know the size or the length of the array, and it's good to always use the dot length to tell you what that is. So in the case where you don't know how many there is because maybe like you read some data from a text file or from Excel file or from a database table, right? So you read those data into the array, you cannot know how many elements there are. So how do you know? Well, you use the dot length to tell you. So if I say scores dot length, that will give me the value of 3. Okay, so you can know the limit when you want to loop through the array. You can know the limit. You can so you can stop your loop. Otherwise, you have an error because you are exceeding the boundary of that maximum index. Okay, so again, to show you that the scores length, if you use parentheses here, it will not work because it's a function. It doesn't have it in arrays. You use that inside a string. So if you want to count how many characters you have in the string name, you use the length method here. Okay. And then I'm going to go, before I go to do some examples, I'm talking about a cloning array. Just be careful when you copy arrays or you assign an array with another array. Okay, because they're referenced just like we saw earlier with the strings. That means that if I create an array called names and I create a second array called temp names or something like that, if I put temp names equals names, that means both of those points to the same memory location, right? So they share the same data, just like you and I, we share the same account, for example. Or if you and you or your family or your spouse share the same bank account. If you add money to the account, you can see it, both can receive it. If you take it out, it affects as well because it's the same net location. Okay, so just be careful when you do that, because you might thought that, hey, I make a copy of, I got an array called A, make a copy of A and put into B, and if I change B, it will not affect A. Well, that will be a problem, right? If let's just say, I make a copy already to A to B, and I want to, delete everything from B, and then lo and behold, later you find out that everything's A is also gone, because you're pointing to the same memory location. So be careful with that. This doesn't work like you would see with the primitive data type, right? So if you put int A is equal to 5, and then you print, B is equal to A, and if you change B, then it doesn't affect A. Okay, so that's something. So you want to do is if you want to copy it, then there are two ways. One is you can use the clone method. Okay, so if you clone it, then you assign the clone, which is a copy, exact copy, replica of A to C, and then now you have two separate objects, two separate arrays, and they're completely separate, so they're not the same. You don't have the same memory location. So now you can do whatever when you want with C or with A, and then they won't affect each other's data. Okay. Otherwise, if you just put C is equal to A, then you have that problem. That's one way. Another way is you create two separate arrays, and then you use a loop. Then you loop through A, and then you read out every element and put that into C, which is much longer process to do it, but it can be done. Right? So, and then I'll stop here. Do iteration here. So we do a loop. I'll show you a loop, and then we'll loop through the array to print out some data from the array using the index as a variable name. Okay, so here I'm going to close this for now. I'm going to go into create a new project. This will be unit 8. Oh, yeah, miss. Okay, and then we'll create a class. I'll just call this one here array class, and we'll make this the main class. Okay. So I could create an array of strings. Again, you can put that here, like months. If I do that, then I'm just saying this is months is an array because of these square brackets. It doesn't tell you that it doesn't have any length. Okay, when you want to use this month, you have to go this step is equal to new string, and then you supply the length in there. So you have to take these steps if you declare the initial month as just a string with that month. Okay, and then after this, then you can start populating the array by using each of the index here. So if you want to assign the first month of 0 as January, right? And you have to do the rest this way because you cannot do the shortcut method. Since you started this way, then you have to do the whole 12 months this way. So you just copy and paste 12 times. You can see it's like really tedious work. Don't like typing that many times. That's slow typist. So 8, 9, 10, 11. Only to 11 because that's the maximum index. 10. Okay, so we put like February, March, April, and then May, June, July, December. Okay, so I declare all my array elements this way, and this is again a lot of work, right? And sometimes it can be helped. You have to do it this way. So now that's one way to do it. If you know that, if you already know what's going to be inside the array, then you could do it the other way, the shorter way, which we'll put here. String, I'll put like here for days, and I'll put here, instead of doing the new stuff, just put like here, you know, Sunday, Monday, this is much quicker. So if I were to do this with the months, I would just have one line, just like this one here. And if you're doing this method, just make sure that you terminate at the end with a semicolon, although you have a curly braces here, right? It's kind of odd because when you write functions or blocks of code, we don't put the semicolon here, right? It doesn't make sense to put that there. So, but this one you do have to put it there to terminate a string or that declaration. So this is how you would declare an array in two different ways. Okay. And then now, if you want to print out the months, you can print out. If you want to print all of them out, all the 12 months, then you could do like system out, print, and then the months array followed by the index, right? And imagine if you do that 12 times. That's a lot of work. Okay. That will print January, and then if you add another line, will print. So one will be like January, and then February this way. Okay, so if you run it now, you see that it does print January, February down here. Okay. Just because I want to write another function here, I want to replace this just for now, so I don't have to type system out print every time. It's just too long. I just want to say out like that. You know what I mean? Make it shorter. So let's just, just for the fun of it, have a public static void out and object. Just put s here. Okay, I'm overwriting. I'm creating a function just to make this shorter. So when I print out, instead of just saying print out whatever it is, just put out that. Okay, and here I put the system out that print, and I'm going to put s dot toString. Okay, so that will shorten my code to just out. It's an object, so I can pass any data to this. Will be fine. I could now say, out 5. Okay, it will print out 5 to the list. So you'll see it prints January, February, March, right? It's much shorter. Save you some typing. Okay, and if you could actually do this, copy this. This would be out. LN for outline. This will be like print, no line, print line. So then you can do like that, right? I'm just like shortcutting my code here. I don't know, being lazy maybe, but also making things more efficient, right? So it's much shorter this way. Okay, so we see that you can print out your months, or the months this way. 10, you can do like 11 times or 12 times, or you can loop it through and then just print using the index. So I'm gonna go and do the loop. You can use a for loop because that's much simpler. So let me comment these out, and then you're gonna say for int I is from 0 to what? What's the next thing here should be? The first part is the initialization. What was the second part? Right, the condition, right? So I is less than the length of the array, right? So you could say months.length. Okay, I mean it's 12. And I don't want to put the I don't want to use the equal sign here, because if I do that, it's inclusive, including number 12. So when I iterate through the array, it's going to put 12 in there. I don't have an index of 12. They're going to have a problem. Okay, I have an error. So just put less than, but not including 12, because I'm starting from 0. Okay, and then here would be just the I plus plus. And then now we can now say out the array names month of I. Okay, so the first one comes with is I of month 0. Then we iterate that through. The second time we months 1 and 2 and 3 all the way to 11, and then when we get to 12, it exits out of the loop. Okay, so here is the result of that array. All right, so that's why if you put equal here, then you see that you have an error, because index 12 is out of bound. There's no index 12 in there. Okay, so be careful when you do with arrays. And you could do the same for days, but then days has a different length, and so you do that different loop. Okay, what if I want to print like not the whole month? I want to print only the first 3 characters of each month here, like OCT, DEC, and so on. How would you do that here? Using what you learned in chapter 7. So if I run this, you see that it prints out the entire month here. I just want to print 3 characters for every month. How would you do it? The substring, right? You could use substring. So you could say output months I, right? Substrings from index 0 to index 2, right? 0, 1, 2. You print out the first 3 characters only, and so when you run this, you get oh no, 0, 1, 2. 0, 1, 2 doesn't work. I think this is the ending. I think that's the count. 2 characters. We want 3 characters. Yeah, I think that's the count here. So 3 characters. Okay, so what if you want all of them to be uppercase? Yeah, right? See how easy that is? 2 uppercase, right? And then now it's all uppercase. Fancy. So there is a function, I mean a loop that loops to the array. It prints out the first 3 characters, and then you uppercase those 3. Okay? So again, just to remember that if you create a new array string of, we call it, new months. If you assign that to the old months, okay, if you do that, and so if I print out here the new months, it should be identical, right? Instead of the months here, I should get the same results back, right? If I do that, I should get the same results back. It should be the same because you have the same copy of the months. Okay. So I just proved that. And then now if I go back in here, if I say, again, the months will be, again, still be January through December. And if I change, the month's value, if I change the, new months of, the first index from January to I don't know, apple or something, right? Makes no sense, but of course, that's it's a string. Okay, I'm not changing the months. I'm changing new months value instead. But when you run the months, you see that it also changes to app, right? It modifies, it changes the months data because the months and the new months share the same memory location. Okay, even though I'm not doing anything to months here because this variable changes the value of that, it also changes the month's value. So just be careful when you do that. Okay, you just don't delete everything because you think that this is a copy of months going to months, the new months. It's not. It's just a new name. Well, it is a new object. It is, but they point to the same memory location. Okay, so because these arrays are reference types. Okay. Then let's move on. We did the iteration through that. That's fine. You can also use a while loop to do it. That's fine too, right? You have to again know the length of that, and then you just have to don't forget to increment your I, because you do that in the body of the loop. Then there's another loop called the enhanced for loop, okay, or commonly known as the for each loop, okay. That will iterate through the array, and you don't have to worry about the length of the array. You don't need to know how many elements are in there. It's going to print everything to the screen. If that's what you want to do, then the for each is the way to go. Okay, you can see that it's really short, really short here. So it has the for, looks at the for the for loop, and you follow by the data type. This data type must match the data type of the array. Okay, if it's an array of strings, then that data type has to be string. If it's an integer, it has to be integer type. This value here, val, or it could be just any variable name you call, doesn't really matter, will store the actual value inside the array. Every single element starting from array 0, index 0, all the way to the end of the array. Okay, so through every loop, you can get the data from the array through this variable called val. Okay, so let's go back to the example and rerun this again with our the different loop. So I'm going to comment these out. Okay, and let me turn this one off. You don't want to change that month. So here, I'm going to loop through not the let's loop through the let's look at the days instead. So let's see 4, and then the days are strings. So string of, let's say, day, right? And then you put the colon there. Okay, the colon is required. And then the next parameter here is the array name, which is array of the days. So it's just with the S and no S here. So it means that for each day in days, print it out, right? So I could now do the same thing out, and then I put day, and then that's it. Okay, I'm not accessing the days array. I'm accessing the value here, a variable here, which stores the day. So the first time it goes through the loop, it's going to be Sunday. So day is equal to Sunday. The second time it goes through, it's going to be Monday, and so on. So we're printing the data directly from this day variable. Okay, so you see that it prints the 7 days of the week. And you can do the same with the months. You can see really quickly how let's say month, or just M here is fine for month, and then print the M out. Okay, so it's much shorter than these down here. Of course, besides the formatting, but You can see you have the days of the week, and then the months starting from January all the way down. Okay, so this is very handy if you know that you just want to print out everything in the array. Okay, so you don't have to worry about the length. Otherwise, if you use the regular for loop, then you have to concern about the length, or the while loop also need to know the length as well. So very, very useful. It gets a little bit tricky when you have you know, an array of arrays. So next time we will learn about you know, two-dimensional arrays. It gets confusing because in here you have to do another inside loop here for another array. So you have a nested loop inside another loop to print the data out. But so that's a very handy loop. It's common in most languages. It made the syntax may be a little bit different. So in Java is again the variable name, data type, temp variable name to store the data from the array. Okay, and in JavaScript will be like for each, and then you know, x in y, something like that. Okay, so it'll be a little bit different, but it's common in most languages. Okay, so that's the enhanced for loop, or the for each loop. You can also store array of objects. Okay, we just saw that you could store primitive data type. You can store objects. String is already an object, but you could store your own classes. You have your custom class. Like for example, if you have a class called employee, and you create an employee object, and then you put the brackets here. So now, oops, now this makes this emps here an array of objects, right? So it's an object, but it stores some data. So you have a variable called emps stores 3 elements, so 3 employees. That's what it means, right? So each employee in here is an object. And notice when I do this, the first employee of which is emp of 0, I have to create a new employee out of that. I think this should be just employees, right? Because each element is an object, you have to instantiate object inside that array. Okay, so it gets a little confusing, but just to make sure an object, you have to treat each element in the block as a separate object inside that big object. So and in the book also mentioned about using a constant to you know, to set as the maximum length of the array, which is nice. So if you know that I gotta have an array of 50 elements, then instead of putting 50 in here, you would use this as, you would use a constant to store the value here. So you can change, only can be changed from outside of the the array. Okay, so for example, here we have, I know I'm using 12, right? I say, because I see this, I say I initialize it to 12. And then later on down here, you know, when you loop through this array, I said month length, but sometimes some people might do this. You want to say, I'm going to loop when I is less than 12, right? If you see that, well, I know that the month has 12. But what if you don't know that it's 12? How do you know it's 12? It could be just maybe I want to loop through that only through 5. Okay, so you don't know that the maximum length of the array. So instead of saying those these numbers like this way, you could say up here, final int you know, max something is 12. And then by convention, the max is the maximum. We know that it's always 12, so down here, that's the max. If I want to do that, because I know that if I do this way, I cannot change the max to something later, right? It can't be changed. So it's fixed at 12. So I'll always know that when I see the max as a constant, oh, I know that the total array is at the max, whatever that value is. So if you put this, you can't tell. It could be 12, it could be 5. What is the maximum value? Okay. But if you put the keyword, the variable max in this, I know that. Okay, I don't care what that is. All I know is it's gonna go all the way to the maximum. Okay. So that way, it's really handy. Also, really good for debugging. And you can't change the array size. Okay. So for objects, so the array class is an object, right, in itself. And I could go up here and say, like, you know, private string name is what, you know, name is blank. I could also have like private age is blank. I mean int age is blank. So I have two fields here. Well, for now, I probably want to make this static, okay? Because, well, is it? Maybe well, we'll see. We'll see if it's static or not. May not work, but okay. So I have two fields, and if I want to create, let's go down here. Let's turn these off. Okay. Again, shortcut is you highlight it, control backslash. Control slash / or the question mark. Turn those off, and I want to go. I don't like the bottom. Let's go to the top. Okay, up here. Okay, so I could create like an array of the array class. So we see that string is a class. So we do the same thing, right? So you can say array class. So data, it's an array of array class. Let's go new array class. No, actually, no. You have to specify the length here would be, let's just say a 3. Okay. So I created an array class called AC object AC. It's going to store 3 objects in there. Have the index of 0, 1, 2. Okay, then so each object in there will have a string of name and then age as an int. So to create the first element of the AC of 0, okay, you have to instantiate the array class object, okay? Because the object inside here, A0, is an object of what type? Of array class type, which is this type here. So you have to say array 0, new array class, and you put the constructor here, whereas here you put the array type, right? So it's different. So array 0 of that has that new object, and you do the same with the other two. So so 1 will also be a new object, 2 also be a new object. You have to instantiate the object first before you can use it. Otherwise, it would say A0, A2, A1 is that it's not it's not defined. So now you treat this A0, A1, and 2 exactly the same as you would do something like this. A class, you know, A is equal to new, right? We know to do that, right? So A dot age is equal to 12, A dot name is equal to Joe. Okay, so this is a simple way. This is a one instance or one object. Here I have an array of 3 objects. So if you want to change the value of A0, I would do the same thing here. So it would be AC of 0 dot age equals 24, AC of 0, the first person or first array object dot name is equal to you know, Lily. So A of 0, A of 1, A2, A3, A5. So you have a collection of arrays. Instead of doing like A, B, and C 3, 4 times, I put everything inside an array. I can put this 1,000 arrays. And again, you can loop through this 1,000 objects very easily because they're standard array. So that makes it really, really handy. Also really easy to maintain your data with arrays. Okay? And so when you loop through the array, same thing. Let's say if you want to loop through the for loop, then still the counter will be just 0, still the index, so it's 0, followed by the, oh, I missed the I here. And then I will be less than the AC length, okay? And then I plus plus, right? And then to print it out, again, out. And then AC of I. Okay, AC of I. If we just print like this, what's going to happen? Does it work? Probably not, right? Or will it work? Yeah, so so the first one is A0, and the next is A1, A2. But if you print it, you see that that's what you get, right? You don't want that. You want to get the name, the age, and all those out. How would you do it? Okay, so we didn't assign the other two. Let's just go and do that first. A0, A1. Say A1, A1, AC1, AC2, AC2. And let's just, this is like 32. This is John. This is like 18, and this is Kirk. Okay, so I have 3 people in this case. When I print them out, I want to print the age and then the name, age and name for each of those. Okay, so if you're doing this way, you actually are printing the object. Like, it's same thing I was saying, print A, right? It's an object. That's what you see array and the results. So this one here, you have to print every dot age dot name out. Okay? So if you print the name will be dot name. Right?
Can you erase the dot name and rerun that for me? I just want to see what it prints.
Oh, here? Yeah. So.
Is that the memory location?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a hash key that will store the memory of this array of object of the A0, A1, A2. So you only see this class object is no data in there. And there is where you can't see the data, right? So to read the actual data, you need to read the field names, which is these right here. Okay, or if there are any methods, you need to call the methods through the object. So the name will be that one. You could say here, like name, right? And then plus that. And then you could append this or print a new line, say age, and then age. Okay. So now when you print this, you will get the actual data out for each of these objects called A0, A1, A2. Okay, so make sure you grab the array index for the object, but then you also want to get the dot property or method to get those data relating to that object. Okay? And you do the same thing if you use the enhance loop. So for, right? So for, so how would you using the for, like this one here? How would you do it using this object class? I want to print out the same thing here by using the hence for loop. So for something, and then print something like this out. So here we say the first is the data type, right? The data type, no, I mean right here. This data type must match the data type in here. So the data type in the AC is array class, right? Okay, so the counter in here, not counter, but the here will be array class. We call it maybe just C colon AC. Okay, you see it? The data type has to match. Okay, so now C is an object. Okay, so C is the same as AC bracket I. So to print the name out, I will still use the same thing here. We copy this and put it in here. Instead of AC now, this whole thing is just C. Right? Okay, I'm getting the object or the index or the value in this case, or the element of the AC array, but each of those element is an object of type array class. And so again, to get the name, the age, I have to still do the dot name dot age and print them out. Okay, do you see that, or is it still confusing? Or okay, so make sure you understand when you call objects inside an array. Okay, so if you look at this one here, it's kind of makes sense that hey, this object called AC can actually store different data type. As I thought you can only store single data type. You can't store strings and numbers in there, right? So an array, well, the original array stores all class. I mean this object or class. So every object will be the same class, but inside the class, because it's an object, you have your own data type in there, right? So just that's how it is, right? So you can have, it's like another way of saying you can have different data type in the array. And now, so now if I comment this out and if I run this, I should get the same results back. Okay? Questions on the objects here? Okay, so that's that one there. And this one here is an example of how you can actually populate the array. You instantiate the object right away inside the loop here. So every employee you create here will have the data, populated. Okay. Well, before we move on, I'm going to talk about parallel arrays. Parallel arrays are arrays that have the same number of elements, and they are related in certain situations, in certain ways. Because again, you cannot store different data type in the same array. You have to separate them out, right? So in this case, for example, you have an array about students, then you will have one that have the student names, another array to store the address, another store the student ID, and store the grade. You can't put those into a single array because they're different data type. And sometimes they won't make sense, right? You can put this into a database table, fine, no problem, but in an array you can't. So if I were to create these arrays, okay, so I could just we can just do that for now. Copy this. I don't have to type it and put it in here. Let me comment these out. All of these. Okay, so I have those arrays there. Actually, I'm going to modify this. I'm going to modify these. So I'm going to add some data to this one here. We'll do the shortcut way. I'm not going to do 100, right? Just do 3 or something. So Joel, Mary, 3. And then the address, again, the thing with parallel arrays, parallel is that they have to be parallel. It means they have to match the data. If you mix it up, then you have a problem because the data don't match. So the first index is 0. That's going to be Joe, and then the first address will be Joe's address. Something like that, right? And then the second address belongs to Mary, so it will be like and the third is George. Okay, so it matched the index. And the same thing with the ID here. Could be just like 1, 2, 4, and 5, 6. Then the grade that they get would be of type char. This would be like, you know, A, and then maybe B here, and then George has C. Okay, so this is a parallel array. Because they are parallel, that means that if I reference the index of 0, I can get all Joe's data from each of these arrays. And if I want to change Joe's data, then I can just reference the same index. So I don't have to have like 4 different indexes for these 4 arrays. So to print them out, I can still go and do int I as one index. I less than 81 of those is fine, right? They're the same. I could choose name dot length, and then I plus plus. And then I'm just going to put output the names. So I put like name here plus names of I, right? They share the same index. And then I could just copy this and do it 3 times, 4 times. So address here, ID here, and then the grade. So just basically changing the array names. Okay, and if I want to, I'll put another like just a separator to do that. Right? Run. So here are the information. Okay, it just go to show that I'm using one index or one subscript to reference all the arrays, and I can get all the records correctly here and display them correctly as long as the arrays are, you know, they are parallel. They have the same length and they match each other up, right? Each of these are referred to the same person. And just make sure you have the things in all this data in the same order. If you change the order, you get completely different data. So this is one way how you could store records in arrays and put that in your program. Okay, so you could read it from a database table, and each record, each field in the table could be assigned to an array. So the table might have, like in this case, with 4 fields: name, address, and its ID and grades, and then you put those into each array. And then you index it by the same index, so they'll all be, you know, in this case, it would be 3. If you do this, okay, then it's a problem, right? Because the third element is not found, and so if you missed by one index, you're gonna have an error. It will say the third one is not found. Okay, so just make sure they match. The length has to match. Yeah, this is quite useful for, like, many occasions. One would be like this. Another could be like a sales table or something like that. You have like maybe a certain range, and you can do some sales pull percentage out of that. If you fall in the first category, then your sales percentages here. If you are a VIP person, then your sales is ID of 2 or 1. And if you're like a, I don't know, first class, whatever it is, and you have a different rate. So you can use different rate based on the level of your, I guess, membership or something like that in a club or a golf course or whatever. Okay, so that's that one. How we do on time? Okay, a few minutes. All right, so this is what's called a parallel arrays.
Hello.
Hey,
Java.
Java it is. Fun.
Well, you guys should come and visit and see what we're doing.
What?
We're doing, well, you guys are doing database stuff here, you're doing arrays.
Arrays. Yeah, I think we'll be taking a break in about like a couple minutes. We can stop by.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, questions on the parallel array? Okay. And so we got that one there. Searching the array. Okay, you can search the array. Well, this is almost like searching through any list. But if you want to compare an array of elements, and you want to check if something is matched up inside the array, then you can use again the loop, and then you can just compare your key to the elements in the array and make sure they match, right? So if you have an array of names or array of price or something like that, and you can do how many matchings are in there. You can count them all by looping through the entire array. You can say if I find the first occurrence of the matching key or search term, then I can just exit out of the loop, right? You can do that by issuing the break command to break it out of the loop. Okay, so that's also very common. There are other ways you will see later next time that there are actually more efficient ways how to quickly search the array, and there's some built-in functions you can just use it to search. But if you have to do it by yourself manually, then this would be the way to do it, right? You can loop through the array, and then every element in there, through every index, you compare the values. Okay, if it's a string, then again, make sure you do a string compare, not equal to, right? So that's important. And if I ask you to, let's just say, if I have like duplicate data in here, if it's like 101 occurs how many times in there, if I say, okay, here's the array, and write the code to count how many occurrences, how many 101s are inside the array. How do you count those? Okay, so you compare every element in there, and if there's a match, then you will update the counter, and then so that you know how many matching elements in there. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward there. Passing arrays to methods. Okay, before we do this one here, it's a little confusing, so why don't we take a break first, and then we'll come back from the break and we'll continue from the passing arrays to methods as a reference and not by value. If you have not heard those terms before, we'll see those examples. Okay, so we'll be back here about in 10 minutes.